Three texts have been read for us this morning. One from 1 Kings 2, 10 to 12, and chapter 3, verses 3 to 14. Ephesians 5, 15 to 20, and John chapter 6, 51 to 58. The first text from the Old Testament tells us about Solomon, who succeeds his father David as the king of Israel. David had ruled for 40 years, and Solomon, as a young man, ascends to the throne. He makes sacrifices, offers sacrifices to the Lord. And at Gibeon, he offers 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. And that night, the Lord appears to Solomon in a dream. And says to him, "Ask what I shall give you." And I presume it's in the dream that he says, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept for him his great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on this throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of David my father, although I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people. Give me wisdom, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this your great people?" This is a great moment in the life of Solomon, where he is asked this question, "Ask what I shall give you." And he asks for wisdom. He felt inadequate as a young king, and he asked for wisdom, that God would guide him and lead him in governance. Walking wisely, he wanted to walk wisely with God's help. Paul in Ephesians 5, 15 to 20 also encourages the church at Ephesus, or the churches at Ephesus, to walk wisely, for the days are evil, and to be spiritually minded. And in the Gospel of John, Jesus encourages the disciples to feed on him, to drink into his love. It has reference to the Lord's Supper. In all these three passages, the emphasis is on all of God's people, by implication, all of God's people learning to lean upon God's wisdom and plugging into God, showing dependence on God, drawing on God's wisdom, and not just depending on worldly knowledge and worldly wisdom. Not just depending on that. Ask what I shall give you. As we meditate on this passage, remember that these words that God said to Solomon in a dream is also a question that he asked all his children. What do you want me to do for you? Solomon, on his part, asked for wisdom. Today we live in a world that is in great turmoil. From age to age, we continue to be in turmoil. We have periods of peace, we have periods of relief, we have periods when we see growth and development in the midst of all of this. But then there are again setbacks because of a crisis in leadership. Because we do not have godly leadership. This failure sometimes we can see in our churches as well. We depend on our earthly learning too much. And there is no harm in depending and learning in the best of schools and best of places of education and gaining all that we can. But when we do not see things from God's perspective, we are missing the whole picture. We miss things that lie deeper and need a deeper resolution that can only come from God's wisdom. With today's text, we should have also had readings from the epistle of James, where he says that earthly wisdom encourages jealousy, selfish ambition, and disorder. You look at the way things are happening in this country, or for that matter in our parliament and in Turkish parliament, the disorder. We do not see godly wisdom at work. It's earthly wisdom. You see selfish ambition and jealousy. Heavenly wisdom, James, the brother of our Lord, says is pure, peaceable, always working for peace, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. This is the result of heavenly wisdom. Christ is our wisdom. He has shown us that service, the cross, non-violence is the way forward. And yet, the world has not paid heed to it. Epistle of James also says and gives us practical wisdom. Be slow to anger, quick to listen, I had a principal by the name of Reverend Dr. John Higgins. He came as a young principal at first. He had a master's in theology. He was Reverend John Higgins, and subsequently it is doctorate. But when he was a young man, Reverend John Higgins, he had taken this verse from James 1:19 and 20 to heart, and that was a central text for his life. Be slow to speak, slow to anger. Quick to listen. There was a crisis in this college before I joined it. It was a crisis between two warring ethnic communities, and let me not name it, because I do not want to create any feelings between ethnic groups and raise ethnic issues. And in the hostel, both these groups were becoming physical. They were throwing soda bottles at each other. People were locked in. Nobody was going out of their rooms. Faculty members, some of them took the initiative to go. They threw soda bottles at them also. No one got hurt, fortunately, I'm told. Then this American missionary, Reverend John Higgins, went to the dorm. They saw who had come. He was calling out to them. No one threw soda bottles at him. When he called them, they came out. And he spoke to them and made peace that day. So when I entered college, I heard this story. Why was he able to do that? Because he was a servant at heart. He was a gentle soul. He was quick to listen, slow to anger. And he had a heart to reconcile people. I had personal experience with him too, but I don't want to go into that now. But I know the man, that he was like that. When the time came for him to step down, not because he was up in years, but he believed that Indian leadership should take over the college. And I was there when the transition took place. He stepped down from principalship when an Indian took over as the principal, Dr. A.C. George, and he worked under him, showing that leadership is all about service. That is heavenly wisdom. Solomon began well, as we know. We must do critical reading of the text. That means careful reading of the text. But at some point, he had grandiose ideas. He wanted to promote himself and, wanted to leave a legacy, wanted to build a big temple and a big palace for himself. And he became oppressive in his ways. He taxed the people heavily and he taxed labor. And as a result of which the kingdom was torn into two, northern kingdom and southern kingdom. And the decline of Israel began there as a nation. And then Israel, northern kingdom, went into exile, the Assyrian exile, and the 9.5 tribes were lost, known as the lost tribes of Israel. That is all subsequently, but the decline began because at some point he forgot. He started well, but he forgot the basics of leadership. But we must give credit and thank God for this legacy that he has left for us, that when God asks us, what I shall give you, what do you want? That we will be able to respond and ask him. We know passages, story of blind Bartimaeus. When he was brought before Jesus, he was crying out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy upon me. Jesus, son of David, have mercy upon me. And then the Lord told his servant, call him. And he came to Jesus. He said, what do you want me to do for you? He said that I might see. And the Lord healed him. And then the text says he followed Jesus. The man at the pool of Bethesda was lying there for 37 years. Jesus comes to that pool, sees a man lying on a mat, and asks, and the Lord must have known that this man has been there, must have seen him also in the past. He asked him a question. Do you want to be healed? And he said, when every time the pool is stirred, somebody else gets in. He said, take up your bed, your mat, and walk. What is it that you want from the Lord? He asks you this question, he asks me this question. And I tell you, he will answer it. You all know the story of Dr. Habib Yusufji. The book was published by us. Several of you bought copies. You have read his story, a runaway Bora boy. Those of you who don't have a copy, you can get a copy from the book center or let us know and we will make sure you get a copy. He had reached America, to cut a long story short, as a runaway boy from Ujjain, Mumbai, goes to Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and from there he gets onto the ship and then gets off the ship without a passport, without documents, and he works on the railroads. A black man took mercy on him and said, "Come work with me." And one day as he was working on the railroads, he saw kindergarten children running out of school, happy. And he leaned on the shovel and he said, "God," at that time he called out to Allah, "God, will I ever be happy like these children?" He just uttered those words to God of the universe. And his life changed. Opportunities came his way. He began to see things that he was not seeing before. And he went for English classes. He got an opportunity to go to school. He got an opportunity to go to college. He finally ends up, at Princeton, and then completes a double master's and a PhD. One master's in Sanskrit and PhD in Indo-European philology. And on the way he had done his bachelor's in theology, his bachelor of divinity. Will I ever be happy like these children? In effect, he said to God, "I want to be happy. I want blessedness." Blessedness. And God gave him blessedness. Joy in his heart forever. He had suffering, he had sad stories, sad events in his life, but in the midst of that, he had the company of God in Jesus Christ and great learning. He never aspired to go back to America. He never went back, in fact, once he returned from there. Nothing wrong in that. But he served till the end. And the last project he did was he started a primary school on a small property that he bought. He lived there and ran a primary school in a village called Garha, which was on the outskirts of Jabalpur. Later on it became famous and popular because the medical college was built there. Beyond Garha. God will hear your cry no matter where we are in our life. He asks us this question, "What shall I do for you?" Give it serious thought and call out to him and say, "Lord, this is what I want. This is what I want, Lord." And he will grant it to you. Let us walk wisely with God's help and to serve our people and our community, drawing upon the life of God. God in Jesus Christ gave himself to us, and he has invited us to partake of his flesh and his blood, symbolized in the bread and the wine, and to live in him and allow Him to dwell in us, and thereby we shall bear much fruit. Fruit that shall last for eternity. Fruit that shall last for eternity.